Good morning. Good morning. Look who we have back. Cactus Jack from Arizona has decided to finally join us again. It looks like you're sitting in a prison cell, but how you doing? Do we need to send bail?
Yeah, actually, yes. Please send that with the amount of money I spent on furniture and all that craziness. Please do. But I'm good. Man. Happy to be on camera. Happy to be back live and not digital consciousness Q as they were calling me. So I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
it was nice to have Zona Buck yesterday with no picture. Doing our best Buckeye Scoop impression with Q playing Nevada Buck yesterday on the show. But we got a big show ahead of you. We got a special guest, our first repeat guest. I really don't consider Chris a repeat guest at this point. He's closer to a rotational co-host with as many appearances that he's made at this point. But our guy Anand and Dory is going to join us again. He did the pre-camp preview with us, and we're excited to have him back. So we're going to bring him up now to talk the Buckeyes' chances in the playoffs this year.
What's up,
Morning,
guys?
Anand. Good to have you. Appreciate you joining us again.
Morning, Ron. Morning, Q. How's it going, fellas?
Pretty good, pretty good. Before we get into it, for the people
Good.
that
How
might
are
not have
you?
seen your first, yeah. Before we get into it, for some of the people that might not have seen your first appearance on here, let them know a little bit about you and where they could find you at before we get started here.
Yeah, so I'm a Columbus boy, born and raised, obviously diehard Buckeye fan. I live in Chicago now, doing NFL content for a company called Player Profiler. So we do a lot of stuff as it relates to charting prospects as they come from college to the pros. So obviously, we get to see a lot of really good football players and guys that are under the radar and kind of grade them out and grade them out as talents. So we do a lot of stuff with college football as is, and kind of, obviously love the Ohio State side of that a little more than most.
Of course, you can't live in Columbus and not love the Buckeyes, so that's to be expected. Last time we talked, we didn't have a quarterback. We have one now. Ryan Day announced that
No.
Kyle McCord is going to be the quarterback, so I think that's the perfect place to jump right in. What are your thoughts on the handling of the quarterback battle and how it shook out?
I thought it was a little strange, but I think it's as much playing to both of those guys as it is to us and the media and everyone involved. I honestly expected it to go through Western Kentucky just a little bit, just to force Notre Dame to prepare for both. I mean, if you're telling people that you have confidence in both guys, which, based on what we saw in camp and, early on, looked to be true. And then we got to last week and it was painfully clear that Kyle's just further along than Devin is. And I think it kind of forced their hand in a way that they maybe didn't see coming, or maybe it was all part of the plan. But either way, I mean, I think last week showed us Kyle's got to be the guy. Not that Devin can't get there by the end of the year. These teams look very different in week 11 and week 12 than they do in week 2. But you're asking a lot if you want Devin Brown to pilot the full offense week 4 at Notre Dame, which is really the first one that we all had circled.
Do you think that Ryan Day handled it correctly by letting Kyle get the majority of the reps and not having more of a balance, as he told us that we were going to see, with them splitting reps these past 2 games? Because me and Q had a heated argument on how this should be handled, and Q said, if you think he's the guy, let him go be the guy until he's not. And I'm like, if you don't know he's the guy, make sure that you get to see both of them. And it seems like Q's path was correct as far as letting Kyle get the reps and seeing if he's the guy, because if he is, then he's getting the most opportunity and he's going to be the most prepared going into Notre Dame. So just your thoughts on Ryan Day's inconsistency with the battle and stating that both of them were going to play, but only seeing Kyle McCord for the majority of the reps the past 2 weeks. I know Devin got 3 possessions this week, and I think maybe 3 last week, but only 1 in meaningful minutes during week 1. So just your thoughts there on the split in the rotation and Ryan Day's communication to the media and the fans about this battle.
I think the biggest question that I had was, do we have a quarterback period? Do we have somebody that is actually ready to play quarterback at Ohio State? Because again, the expectations that come with it are not the same as, if you play quarterback at Indiana or if you play quarterback at Michigan State. Yes, those programs are in the Big Ten. Yes, they have expectations. They're not these expectations. It's a lot like playing quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. You're being asked to carry a brand in a way that other positions in the sport just aren't talked about. And so I think he gave Devin as much of an opportunity as he could give him to take the job. And I think what we saw in real time last week, especially, was Devin just didn't take the job, which, to be fair to him, is going to be tough when you're a year down in terms of development at a school that Ryan's had Kyle for 2.5 years now. It's going to be a tough task to kind of overcome that time and that coaching and that consistency day after day after day. Even if you string together a couple good days, a couple good weeks, it's going to be a long time before you get to being as consistent as someone that's been there for the same amount of time. I appreciate the fact that they tried to make it, what it was, which was a true competition for a while. But at some point, you've got to go with your guy. And I think they kind of towed that line a little too long for my personal liking. But again, they saw stuff day to day that I didn't. So I didn't necessarily have a problem with it. It's probably not how I would have handled it. I would have just let it play out at Indiana, kind of the way that they let it play out against Youngstown. But, it was pretty clear, even against inferior competition, who the superior quarterback was. And I don't know if it looked like that in practice to them or in camp, but the stuff that we saw, they were relatively close, I would say. It kind of seemed like Kyle was a little bit ahead most of the time, but not egregiously so, not as much as it showed up against Youngstown State last week.
So you noted a couple times that you felt that it was evident that Kyle was the better quarterback
in
the two showings. Go ahead, Q.
No, I would say the way they kind of played it out, I wasn't really a fan of on the field, because it was like, all right, we know who the guy was all this time, and we kind of BS you a little bit. So, but I mean, Kyle got his chances; he took them. We all can be happy with that, and it looks like his momentum going forward. I was just like, it looks like you had your mind made up before we got to this, so you could have just let us know before week 1.
Absolutely. You noted a couple times that you thought that Kyle was clearly the better quarterback in the 2 weeks. That brings us to our next question. Do you think Devin got a fair shake? I mean, you seem to think that it really wasn't that tough of a decision after seeing them play 2 games. Do you think that Devin was given a fair opportunity to put his best foot forward in these 2 weeks and the way this battle was handled?
Yeah, I do. I mean, anytime you're splitting first team reps in fall camp, media there, media not there, fans allowed there, fans not allowed there, everything that came out was kind of the same, where they split those reps. And if Kyle is your guy and you're really not giving Devin a shot, there's no reason to split those reps. You can say that he's been impressive. You can say that he's been, really pushing Kyle, kind of the way that we've heard some of these quarterback, quote unquote, competitions go before. But they were legitimately giving him first team reps, and he was splitting them with Kyle 50-50 as far as we saw. And I think the thing that they were waiting to see was, will Devin come on and seize this job in a way that we can't say no to him, as opposed to, well, we're going to hand it to him because he's got a little bit more mobility than we think Kyle has, and we think he might have a little bit more live and arm, out there at training camp. I think they waited to see if he would seize the job as opposed to just handing it to Kyle. And then I think what you saw play out the last 2 weeks was basically against 2 teams that we don't think are very good. The offense looks sluggish, and Kyle just did more than Devin did. And at some point, you've got to pick a guy and go. You can't do the whole JT Cardell thing. We saw how that worked out. And I think they wanted to avoid that and learn from that mistake, because you can't have – it's great to have 2 quarterbacks you believe in. That's not a problem. But if you tell the people that one quarterback is significantly better than the other and it doesn't play out that way, people are going to be pissed. If you'd seen Devin come out against Youngstown and light the world on fire, I think we'd be having a different discussion today. But it played out the way that it played out. And, whether or not people are happy that it is Kyle over Devin or Devin over Kyle, it worked out the way it worked out, and we've got a quarterback, and basically that's all that matters. I think he's more than good enough to get us to where we need to go.
So this months long battle at quarterback has finally come to an end after watching this whole thing play out from, CJ Stroud departing, the spring injury, the fall camp battle, both guys getting reps during the first 2 weeks. How would you grade Ryan Day's handling of this quarterback battle, given the result and the way it played out? I mean, we didn't lose any games. No one transferred. Everyone's still here. We have our quarterback, and we're 2-0 going into week 3. It wasn't probably the most ideal way for it to play out, and definitely wasn't pretty. But how would you grade the overall handling of the battle and result?
I think we'd say like a B to a B plus here. It's not a failure. I know everybody wants to say the sky is falling because the drop off that it's looked like from CJ to what Kyle has been so far has been somewhat alarming for people. But I think a lot of that has to do with what's around him. I mean, CJ's offensive line looks a lot different than Kyle's did. And I think they're trying to patch all this together and see what they've got. And you had 3 weeks. I mean, we knew this in the preseason. Basically, you had all of fall camp, and then you've got 3 weeks to really tinker around with what you got, because a night game at Notre Dame is not the time to try new stuff in terms of personnel. It's not the time to try new stuff in terms of inserting your backup quarterback. If you want to have packages for certain guys, or as people have put out there, if you have a running back that kind of separates himself early and kind of shows that he deserves more touches than you initially thought, you can get all that out in those first 3 weeks. And it's good that they made this decision going into Western Kentucky, because they're going to score. I mean, the people that haven't seen WKU, like, they throw the ball a lot and they're going to score. And we're going to find out, especially early on, just how prolific this passing offense can be, because they're going to have to put up points. I mean, this is not this is not Youngstown State. This is not Indiana. This is a much more potent passing offense, and is going to be kind of the litmus test of where are we as a passing offense, because I don't know how much useful data you can gather from playing a Youngstown State last week.
Absolutely. Q, any thoughts you wanted to get in there before we go on to the next question?
Just wondering, as far as Notre Dame goes, I know we talked about the passing attack and putting up points. What else are your biggest concerns for that game after seeing what we saw the first 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the combination of run and pass coverage, the way that Jim has called big games so far, has been rather aggressive. And there's a part of me that's concerned that he might go too conservative after getting burned against Michigan last year, and obviously against Georgia in the semifinal. That's that in the offensive line, right? It's the defense needs to prove it, and Hartman's a capable quarterback that Notre Dame hasn't had in a long time. I think the last guy that they had that was really capable at that level was probably Brady Quinn. It's been a long time since they've had juice like that at QB, and I'm not saying that he's an NFL prospect that's going to light the world on fire and be a top 5 pick, but they just haven't had a guy that is capable of piloting a pass game in that manner in a long time. So obviously you're worried about the secondary, you're worried about the defensive line. I think linebacker, we're pretty sure that we know what we've got, as we have been for a year now. It's basically, will the DBs stay the way that they've stayed looking against an Indiana and Youngstown when you scale up that competition? And then how well can that offensive line hold up essentially in their third or fourth week together as a full unit? It's a big task. For those of you that watched Texas Bama, it may have to look the way that Texas beat Bama, where you're in a game for 3 quarters that it looks like you're, the better team, but the score doesn't look that way, and then you pour it on in a quarter. And Ohio State's shown the capability to do that before. We haven't had to see it. I don't think we'll have to see it this week, but you're not going to know what this team is until we get out of that Notre Dame game and you have evidence of some trial in some way that's comprehensive. The offense gets tested and the defense gets tested.
I didn't know if you
another
had
follow-up
anything
to that. Do you think we get the best version of Ryan Day
Against Notre Dame? is what you're asking?
Did you hear me?
Yeah, you said against
Yeah.
Notre Dame.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah. Do
think?
you think we
Are
the
you
best
asking?
version?
I don't think we're gonna get CFP Ryan Day. Um, that guy is bowl special only. It seems basically that's caution to the wind, and we're gonna do everything for everything. But I do think you're gonna see something similar to what last year's Notre Dame game plan was, but later in the game, as they kind of started to lean on the run game and realize, hey, they just don't have the linebackers to run with our running backs. Why are we trying to throw the ball? Even though we are a prolific passing team, this is just easier. We'll lean on the run game and get the hell out of here. I think that's going to be more of the approach initially. And then once that kind of wears down a little bit, you're going to have to throw Marvin Mecca their balls, and you're going to have to get Carnell involved in some way. I know that, we talked about him in the preseason, but man, is he special. But I think I don't think you're going to get fully unhinged CFP Georgia game Ryan Day, but I think you're going to get kind of what you've seen in major games before, where it is you try to throw a punch or two early, get a little conservative, feel the game out, and then at that point it's kind of reassess and figure out what we're best at in this particular moment and try to win the game that way.
So we jumped ahead a little bit to Notre Dame. I wanted to back up just a little bit before we start talking about the outlook of this team. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the first two games, starting with Indiana. I mean, everyone had an opinion coming out of Indiana. We criticized the defense that only gave up 3 points. We got out of there with a win, but with no passing touchdowns. Buckeye fans' hair was on fire coming out of that game. So just wanted to get your thoughts initially on the opener, and then we'll get to Youngstown State before we really start making sweeping judgments of this team and the outlook for this season.
I mean, if you ask Ohio State fans in the offseason, right, of which we are 3 of them, and if I'd asked you in the offseason, would you rather win that game 23-3 at Indiana, or would you rather win that game 56-35? Which one would leave you more confident in Ohio State? Now, I'm not saying that those are the only 2 outcomes. They probably should have won that game by more points. But if I give you the choice between these 2 that are fairly similar, everyone would say I would rather have 23-3 because it shows signs of life for our defense that we haven't had in a long time. Whereas the offense under Ryan has never been a problem. It's never been a problem in big games. It's had sluggish moments before. Last year's Notre Dame game is a fantastic example of that. There have been moments, there have been full games and a half where it's looked clunky, but that's never been the issue long-term for this team. And so I was rather encouraged by the fact that they are able to win a game that way by playing borderline suffocating defense and sit there and say, okay, like you can move the ball on us if you want from time to time, but you're not scoring, which was the biggest problem that we had last year was you're allowing explosive plays that turn into touchdowns. If you allow explosive plays that you can force and slow down and lock into 3s and sometimes 0s instead of 7s, the offense has always been capable of scoring enough to win those games.
If you would have asked me that question preseason and added that there would have been no passing touchdowns, I might have had to leave the room and started breathing into a brown paper bag for a second. I would have been pretty nervous, but you make a great point. With all the questions that we've had about this defense and especially Jim Knowles in the past two seasons, I think that seeing them come out there and be solid and only give up 10 points to the first 2 games, and like you said, Ryan Day has a pedigree on offense. We've never seen him not have a quarterback that's competent out there, able to sling the ball around. If you look at some of the sets that we were running against Indiana, a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of 3 tight end sets, not really spreading the ball out there, not really trying to get the vertical pass game going. So I think it was a lot of game planning, first-time quarterback, first-time center, struggles on the offensive line. But overall, I think those things are going to get fixed going forward, and it is good to see that we're not dealing with a defense with a ton of holes in it starting in week 1, week 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest question that we've always had is the defense good enough to beat Michigan, to win the Big Ten, to get to the playoff, and to win a national title? And this team may early on, as you know, it struggles with growth, and you're replacing multiple offensive linemen, you're breaking in defensive backs, some of them that are super young. Um, if you struggle early on offense, if the defense can carry you early, that's not necessarily such a bad thing, I don't think personally, because we have evidence that no matter how bad the offenses look, it gets fixed over time. Now, I'm not saying we're going to turn into the Ohio State team that finished the year against Georgia last year. That may not be the level of offensive capability that this team has. It just might not be. But the defense might be better enough that doesn't matter. It's just a game that they're trying to figure out right now is, how much better are we on defense than we were a year ago? And how close to last year's watermark offensively do we need to get? Do we need to bust out trick plays? Do we need to have a package for a more mobile quarterback? How many running backs are we playing? How deep do we want to go in our wide receiver rotation? If we're going to play Cade Stover and G. Scott together, what does that look like? Are there times where we should put G out there by himself over Cade Stover? These are all the questions that they're trying to get answered before they go to Notre Dame to really unleash what I think is going to be the first real look at what Ryan thinks this 2023 playbook can look like. Whether it actually works out the way that he thinks it will or not, we'll find out. And I think we're going to find out live in real time on national TV that night in South Bend. But so far, the encouraging signs of the things that we wanted to see fixed are fixed. The problem is a lot of the stuff that we didn't worry about, we've become worried about. And historically, they've fixed that pretty quickly when it's been a problem. But again, we want to see it. We don't want to just be told about it.
So I was getting ready to move straight on to YSU, but you said something that I cannot let us just skirt past. You said that maybe there's a chance that G. Scott pushes to be the only tight end on the field in certain sets. Do you think there's a chance that G. Scott could push to be tight end 1 before the end of the season? We've been talking about G for years now, ever since he converted into that tight end room. We all believe that G is the better passing threat, has the better hands, and will be a more dynamic receiving threat for the Buckeyes. But all we've heard about this season is G. Scott's blocking abilities. His run and pass grades on PFF have been great. We haven't seen him getting missing blocks like we have some of the other tight ends. So do you think that's truly a position that G could really push for by the end of the year and be the primary tight end on this team?
The weirdest part about the way that Ohio State's run pass games and run games forever is we've had premium tight ends and just not featured them ever. And the really strange part about it is, I mean, you can obviously see Justin Fry's influence here in terms of the way that they're trying to run the ball and the 12 personnel sets and even 3 tight end sets that we get from time to time. I think that based on his versatility overall, I think there are going to be certain situations in which by the end of the year, they're going to have to make that decision, whether or not they think G. Scott is better than Cade Stover at doing certain things. And that's not a knock on Cade, who, has been a great player for us and has made huge play after huge play for this team. But they just have different skill sets. And, if you're going to run 2 tight ends out there, you don't want 2 carbon copies of the same guy. So there are going to be situations where I think, if you want a true inline tight end, and if you want to run NFL run schemes, there are going to be times where you'd rather have G. Scott out there. And I don't think it's going to be like he takes over the role and, Cade Stover is relegated to the bench. We never see him again. I doubt that happens. But I think there will be times where G. Scott is the only tight end out there as we go forward. And I think he's earned the right to do that, much like I think Chip's earned the right for some RB1 touches.
Yeah, Ryan Day has talked about the RB1 situation multiple times, and he has made it clear Chip is RB1. Anytime he starts to criticize the running back room, he catches himself, but betrays the guy. Or I need to get Trey more carries. I'd like to get Dallin more carries, but Trey also needs more carries. So he seems to have some sort of loyalty or affinity to Trey and belief that Trey is going to assert himself as that guy. Yesterday we talked on the show about some of the offensive line struggles, and is Chip maybe the more fitting back for the current state of our offensive line, with some of the holes not developing properly, the misalignments. You have that back that's a little bit more shifty, able to make a guy miss in the backfield or not go down with the first tackle. What type of element does that add to this offense? But it just does not seem that Ryan Day is interested in hearing that conversation, because I mean, there's some. I mean, we're sitting here having this conversation about RB1, and they're putting him at fullback. They have him lining up in the eye at fullback. So, like, what are your thoughts with the handling of that situation? Do you think Trey becomes the back that Ryan Day is telling us that he is, or do you think that do you think Trey will Chip will ultimately push for that position at some point this year?
I think they learned something last year that they're going to try and implement this year, which was, they tried to ride Trey like a workhorse, and then they tried to run Mayan like a workhorse, and then they tried to run Chip like a workhorse, Xavier like a workhorse, and basically tried to keep a guy in there so that he could get into a rhythm. And I think they just said, screw it. If we have three backs we like, we're going to put three backs we like out there in whatever formations we can get them, however we can get them out there. But I think week one, it was pretty clear Chip was the most well-adjusted to run the things that they want to run at the moment. Now, obviously, as the offensive line develops, as, Trey gets back to full 100%, I think he's still the best running back on the roster, but he may not be the best running back on the roster to run the stuff that they're trying to run. And that's kind of got to be a decision that's made, as you see things develop. I thought that, that drive to put Indiana away, where it was basically, Chip and Mayan Williams were incredible, especially, running I formation stuff and basically put a hat on a hat, run downhill, hit somebody. It looked like, Jim Tressel from back in the day. That kind of offense can still work. We've seen it still work across the country as long as you've got the athletes to run it. And Ohio State does. It's going to become more of a pro style offense as long as, they have the capability at running back. And I think, everybody's freaking out about, who is RB1, how do we distribute these touches? I think it's just a good thing they have three that they trust to do that. And it's because they needed all three of them last year and then some. I know that people love Evan Pryor. They've said great glowing things about him as well. So having four, even three that you really trust to get the job done goes a long way, especially when you look at what we dealt with at the end of Georgia, where it was CJ and friends minus down top two wide receivers, down top two tight ends, down top four running backs. I mean, if you get these guys meaningful touches, which is something that, as a fan base, we've complained about forever, and you're starting to see them, implement that late in these blowout games, just get them touches however you can. Against Youngstown State, pull the starters in the middle of the third quarter and give these kids chances to show you what they're capable of, because at some point it's college football. There are going to be injuries. We're going to need them. And you don't want their first action out there to be, pass set on 3rd and 6 at Notre Dame. And you've never seen this kid run the ball before. You've never seen him in pass pro. So I think they've done a solid job of showing us, hey, this is what we've got. From there, make the best decision for the team. But I do think of all of them, Trey is still the most talented. And when he's 100% right, I still think he's the right way to go.
Absolutely. I think all of these backs have things that they do well. And I think if they find a more situational rotation for them, more than a deserving rotation or like some try to keep everybody happy rotation, and just think about these players and what they do best and put them in the best positions to succeed. And if that's 8 carries, if that's 15 carries, let it be what it is. But for the most part, I think they need to have a more situational rotation more than a seniority style rotation where it's like, all right, well, we're going to get everyone in there and just rotate everyone. Our guy Cactus Jack is really just, he has an Ethernet plugged into the desert, but we're just not getting any internet pull for our guy Q. So he's going to drop out for the rest of the day. Smash that like button, and hopefully we can get Q's internet fixed. I really think that's the problem. We have 50 people in here, but only 14 likes, and it's just really bogging down Q's internet. So let's run those likes up and hopefully get Q back in here tomorrow with some video on. I hate doing this show with Nevada. I'm so thankful for Anand to be here with us to do the show with us and fill in for Q, so we don't have to do our own version of Buckeye Scoop and talk to a picture frame. So I want to move on to the YSU game. We saw the struggles against Indiana. It set off the Chicken Little alarm. The sky is falling. Every Buckeye fan was losing their mind, including me. You go back and watch the episodes after week 1. I was ready to burn it all down. So week 2, I came back off the ledge. I think we saw a ton of improvement and reason for optimism against Youngstown State. I know it was a lower quality opponent, but I just want to get your thoughts coming out of that game. Did you see the improvement that you wanted to see, and just your overall thoughts coming out of week 2?
Yeah, Ron, I mean, especially the way that this team is built, you just want to see them get better week by week. You know, if you ask a college football fan, when do you want your team to look their best? It's not week 2. like if that's as good as this team will ever look, we're in real trouble. We know from looking at the past that that's not the case, but a lot of the stuff that you wanted to see fixed, quote unquote, from Indiana was fixed. The run game looked good. The pass game looked significantly better. Columbus, we have a quarterback. Thank God we can, stop arguing on message boards about that. Poor Bucknuts 24/7 guys trying to tell everybody that we'll be fine at quarterback. Everybody's been worried about, will this pass game ever show signs of life? They just didn't need it to against Indiana. I mean, you take out the touchdown that was thrown to Marv. That was a beautiful throw from Kyle against Indiana that, they came back later and said should have counted, but didn't. Of course, whatever. Let's get the bad calls out of the way now instead of in the CFP, by the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's not see that. Let's not see that pitch to the boundary on 3rd and 1 ever again. Please.
I mean, that's been, for whatever reason, that's Ryan's version of Urban's 3rd and 1 QB sneak or QB power, whatever you want to call it. Bash, I guess we'll call it here. But yeah, I mean, I think sometimes as a coach, it's going to be hard for you to scout your own tendencies because you have something that's worked for so long with so many different players. And, this is just a different team. It's a different mystery. It's a different puzzle to solve as to who your 5 best alignment are, as to who your 3 best receivers are, your 2 best tight ends are. Formationally, what do you want to do? How do you want to attack this team schematically? Because until you get to a Notre Dame, you're basically playing against air. You're trying to figure out, what do these guys have in them against inferior competition, and how will it hold up based on what we've seen when you get a team that really can threaten you? Because I promise Notre Dame can really beat this team. Notre Dame is absolutely a real threat. They're not a joke. This is not Notre Dame of 2011 where you show up, run the ball 57 times and walk out of there with a win. At least I don't think so. So they're going to have to get creative and do some stuff early in the season that we haven't seen in a long time, where you're going to have to actually, devise offensive plans that aren't, hey, throw the ball to 18 and get the hell out of the way, which I know is what we all want the game plan to be, because that might be the best player in America. But, I don't know if that's viable for 4 quarters against a team as good as Notre Dame is. But I thought a lot of the problems that we saw against Indiana, or at least, the perceived problems, were at least quelled against Youngstown State, if not outright solved. They kind of showed growth enough that you can say by Notre Dame, they'll be fine. By Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan, we'll see what it looks like going forward.
So a little bit of housekeeping before we keep it going. I want to give a big shout out to our guy, Matt. He was the first one in the chat. I know it's a little late in the episode, but we always give a shout out to the first person in the chat. So big shout out to Matt. Good morning to everyone in the chat. Appreciate all y'all. Make sure you smash that like button. We're going to transition into our biggest concerns for this team, and our guy Cyber Nerd with a super chat. dives right into potential concerns. He says OSU ranks 114th on offensive third down conversions, according to ESPN. How concerning is this to you? Wow, man, you must be reading the show notes, because the next topic was biggest concerns. And what do you know? We have one in the super chat. So big shout out to you, Cyber Nerd. And what are your thoughts on that? The third down conversion rate.
That is my biggest concern for this team thus far, because it tells me that they're still tinkering with what they think their best third down packages, their best red zone packages. And you ideally want to get in those scenarios against an Indiana, against a Youngstown, against a Western Kentucky, so you know what you can do against the Notre Dame. The fact that they've been this bad on third down is highly concerning, but I mean, we just haven't seen it. It hasn't been a problem in the Ryan Day era. They've been very good on third down. It's been super easy on 3rd and 2 to hand the ball off to really good players. It's been fairly easy on 3rd and 7 to throw the ball to really good players. And thus far, the biggest question that I have, which feeds directly into this, is on third down, when teams know you're going to run, can the offensive line hold up in run blocking? And when teams know you're going to pass, can they hold up in pass pro? Because a lot of what Ohio State has succeeded on so far are the downs that you don't know what's coming. Whereas on 3rd and 1, when you know run's coming, they've had issues executing there. And that's partially a schematic thing. I think that's part of breaking in a new offensive line. I think that's part of having 3 running backs with different skill sets. I think that's part of having a quarterback that now has 3 career starts. There's just it's all very green, and they're trying to figure it out on the fly. But yeah, Cyber Nerd, I think that is my biggest concern with this team right now, because the defense has shown signs of life that it hadn't before. The offensive line is always going to be a work in progress anytime you have a new set of 5, even though we like what we've got at guard. But I think that is the biggest concern for this team, especially as you look at a Notre Dame team that offensively has shown that they can sustain long drives and that they can put up explosive plays. We're going to have to match some of those on our end, or at least try to. On third down, when you've got 3rd and 2, you have to get first downs. When you get to 3rd and 7 and 8, Marvin and Mecca are going to have to make some of those plays. And we just haven't seen it yet, which is absolutely concerning. No question about it.
So I want to play devil's advocate a little bit here. How much do you think the struggles on third down have to do with 2 separate things? One, the penalties that we've seen from the offensive line, the false starts, the holding calls, the hands to the faces, getting us off schedule and having us trying to convert on longer third downs than we should be against an Indiana or Youngstown State. Do you think that some of these third down conversion issues could be solved by limiting some of the penalties and issues that we're seeing on the offensive line, the tackles for losses that we're seeing, guys just shooting through gaps and not getting negative yardage on 2nd down, things that we're seeing struggles earlier on before third down, causing us to have more difficult third down situations. And then the other thing is Ryan Day experimenting on third down right now? Like, are we seeing plays that Ryan Day just wants to see how they work in the game? Are these the same type, or do we expect to see the same type of struggles with the third down play calling as we get in further into the schedule and face tougher opponents?
Yes, I think the offensive line questions are, if you're asking the question, what's the biggest question mark as a unit on this team? That's it. And it's penalty related. It's, run scheme related, pass pro related, all of it. I mean, they were the biggest question going into the season, and they're still a question, which, for most teams would be alarming, but Ohio State has the talent to cover for a lot of those issues that the line has had. But yeah, I mean, penalties are penalties, man. You can't keep turning 3rd and 3 into 3rd and 13 and hope to live that way. It's different when you get into a 1st and 20 and know that you have 3 downs to get that back. Whereas, you go from 3rd and 2 to 3rd and 17, after some 15-yard penalty, drags you down. That's a punt. I mean, I know we have really explosive athletes that can go get you big plays, but against really good teams, that's probably a punt. And that's absolutely factoring into this third down issue that we have at the moment. Granted, it's 2 games. It may get fixed this week, and we may never see this problem again. But yeah, I mean, a 2-game sample size of being this bad on third down, which we've never seen, at least not that I can remember that we've been this bad on third down in a long time offensively. And then, sorry, completely blanked on what the second part of that was.
The offensive line struggles, and then we talked about earlier about Ryan Day's play calling on third down. Do you think because it's early in the season, because of the opponents that we see, is Ryan Day mixing it up and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't? Do you think there's plays that we've seen on third down that we likely won't see again on third down? Do you think he's just really experimenting with the playbook as far as seeing what works, what doesn't early on in the season? Or do you think he's legitimately struggling with what is the best play call to get the first down?
I think his play calling on third down so far has been pretty vanilla. And I think that's intentional. I think the idea there is we don't want to give away anything that we're going to use against the Notre Dame or anyone down the road on third down. But I also think part of it is you're building on what you can see, right? If you're going to run power, if you're going to run play action, if you're going to run a hard play action on, what we blocked as power, you want to see where the holes open up, which of your O linemen are doing the best job in those situations before you call those boots or before you call those play actions and the flare screens that go outside that drive everybody crazy. All of those things I think we'll start to see this week, and then it'll really ramp up when you get to Notre Dame and everything hits the fan, and you've got to kind of, trial by fire, sink or swim, however you want to put it. Once you get there, I think you've got to really consider everything that we've seen not work, whether it's, offensive linemen that have had issues with holding, whether it's, do we think we can run on this front on third down and 3? I think he's intentionally doing vanilla things out of specific formations in order to see where the advantages can be had. If we like G. Scott's blocking a little bit more than Cade's, maybe you fake something to Cade's side and then throw back to G's side. There are little things here and there that I think he's trying to tinker with right now, but we really won't see it until we get to Notre Dame. And so it's hard to say, oh, he's intentionally holding these back, but I think that's what it is, because I mean, you're not running the ball on 3rd and 5 if you're not just really screwing around and seeing if your O-line can move guys.
Absolutely. Big shout out to our guy Cyber Nerd. That was a great question. Great way to start this segment. Another question that I have as far as concerns with this team, are there any positions where you're side-eyeing the depth chart, or do you think we have the best guys playing everywhere on the field right now?
I think we have the best guys playing everywhere on the field right now. I know that the most common one in the chat, and I know that everybody in Buckeye Nation wants to see CJ Hicks. I know. I want to see him too. I get it. I wholeheartedly get it. But I think, Jimmy's got the right 11 out there right now. If that changes, if we see something that we didn't think we needed, that we didn't think we were going to see against Western Kentucky, maybe you see more of them against Notre Dame. I mean, you've seen the impact that Sonny's made just and I mean, we talked about it from camp. He was completely unmissable. Like there was every so often there's a guy on either offense or defense where you just sit back and you're like, okay, yeah, that guy has to play. Put him wherever, let him do whatever he's got to play. So that's the way that we looked at Sonny, which I don't think they looked at him like that last year. So I don't know if that's growth and development. I don't know if it's, I don't know if it's just, hey, we had some guys that, moved on that we can now replace, but either or, I think the best 11 are playing on offense. I think the best 11 are playing on defense right now. Now that may not be true in week 10, but I think as of this moment, I think the right 11 are starting on both sides.
So an interesting topic that I've seen bubbling up on Buckeye Twitter is the use of Sonny Styles when the nickel comes on the field and them taking him off for a nickel corner or nickel safety and having either some combination of Malik Hartford, Jihad Carter, Josh Proctor at free safety, Lathan at strong safety, and then bringing in nickel on and taking Sonny off the field. It seems like they took Sonny off the field a good bit last week. Does it concern you that they're not finding a way to have Sonny on the field when they feel that teams are in a very pass happy situation?
Yeah, they're going to have to find a spot for him. And I think the logical spot is to potentially sub off a backer as opposed to subbing off a safety or a corner. If you're going to run basically the way that Ohio State runs nickel, is kind of unique to Knowles and the structure that he runs. I think that Sonny actually weirdly fits better at backer in nickel structures than he does even at safety. But you're going to have to teach him that. And I think that's that's going to take some time. Linebacker filling is not the same as safety filling. It's not, 1-to-1 in terms of, oh, let's just move him down and see how he does. It's going to take some time for him to get comfortable with that. But that's what I would do. I think if they haven't put him out there, it's for one of two reasons. It's either they don't want to show the looks that they have putting him where they want to put him on third down, or it's they're trying to teach him a role that he can play specifically on third down. Because again, you don't want one of your best defensive players off the field on third down. That's just, you're unintentionally tying a hand behind your back when you have a playmaker and a guy that really is special. You've got to find a third down role for him, and I think they will.
Yeah, I see in the chat they're like, you want Sonny, but the team needs Jordan. No, I completely agree. I don't think that Sonny Styles is a great option at nickel to be having in coverage. I mean, yes, he's a unicorn, but is he a cornerback? No, absolutely not. No. So I'm not mad about them bringing on a true nickel. We've been screaming for a cornerback at nickel. What I'm just wondering is if we think he's our best defender, is there a way that we can find a way to have our best defender on the field against pass-happy teams? Because I just don't think that it's reasonable or logical moving forward to have Sonny off the field every time that we're nickel.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. It's you've just got to they've got to experiment and figure out a role for him, because asking him to play nickel corner just doesn't make any sense. It diminishes his skill set. It doesn't allow him to do what he's best at, which is wreak havoc. I mean, of course he can cover. That's not what you want him doing. I mean, you're watching for everybody that loves college football and follows everybody. You're watching LSU try to reinvent the wheel with Harold Perkins right now, where they have him as an off-ball linebacker when he's one of the best edge rushers we've ever seen in college football. It's the same thing. You just go let him go do what he does and figure out the role that lets him do it. Because trying to fundamentally push him into a role that you need because he's your best player doesn't work. It's never worked. It won't work. Every single time someone tries to do this, it ends disastrously. Let him go do what he's special at. And if that means you have to create a sub-nickel package that swaps him in for a backer, whether it's Steele or whether it's Tommy, whoever it is, that's fine. Let it be. That sucks, that you're taking one of your veteran players off the field. But if he's one of your best defenders, which to this point thus far he has been, you got to find a way to keep him out there.
Absolutely. I'm interested to see what the looks look like this year or this week, especially after we see the All-22 film and see how they choose to use Sonny against such a pass-happy team. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to stop the pass without Sonny on the field, then so be it. I'm happy with that. I want to see whatever makes his defense the most successful, but I'm interested to see if they're just holding it back and they do have ways that they plan to get him involved in the pass game more. Before we move on to this next question, I see there's 50 people in here. Make sure you smash that like button. Let's run it up to 40 likes before we get out of here. You see we're having technical issues. Our likes are low, so our internet's not working. We lost QP Ski for the interview, so we want to get him back. So let's make sure we run those likes up. Last time you were on and on, we talked about Julian Fleming and his struggle that he had in the practice that you were at, but you said he still asserted himself as a vocal leader, and you could tell that's someone that people look to, and he's very vocal out there on the field. We've seen a ton of Julian Fleming. He was the highest. He had the most receiving yards in week 1. It looks like he's really solidified himself at that wide receiver 3 position. Do you think that he holds that down the entire season, or do you think that there's someone on the roster more dynamic that can elevate this offense going forward?
I mean, I think it's easiest to forget, right? Julian's had 2 shoulder surgeries, I think it is, on both shoulders. Is basically hasn't been himself in a long time. And you're seeing what he can be. Because if you remember, everybody's obsessed with Jeremiah Smith and this massive 5-star top 3 player in America. That's what Julian Fleming was. Like it's easy to forget because Emeka and Marv have been so good, but Julian was supposed to be that guy. Like that's what he was recruited to be, was to be the one. And so I know that everybody's excited about Carnell, they're excited about Brandon, but if Julian is right, he's been here this is the full 4th year for him. I think that, he brings a dimension to this offense that is desperately needed. And what that is stability. He's been there. He's seen what this teams look like when they've had an elite defense, when they haven't had an elite defense, when they've had, Justin Fields at quarterback, when they've had CJ, when they've had Kyle. He's seen cycles that other guys in that room just haven't, and on that side of the ball just haven't. And there are going to be times where that leadership is needed. And that's not to say that I don't think Carnell and Brandon couldn't become better players than Julian is at the moment. But everybody's forgetting just how good he was supposed to be because of what you've seen when he's played through injury. And I know it's hard to rid your mind of the drops and lots of things that you want back if you're Julian. But if he's healthy and he's 100%, which he looks so far, I mean, you're talking about potentially one of the best receivers in America. And we're lucky to have an embarrassment of riches and to have those problems.
Absolutely. And someone noted in the chat that Julian has been blocking well. That's one thing that does jump out on film. And we've seen Emeka whiff on blocks. We've seen Marv look disinterested in blocking. But Julian's out there putting his nose into it every play. So that is the one thing that I do have to give him props for. I do think that I feel like something that's missing from this offense is, and I thought Emeka would be the guy, it does not seem like we have a yak guy. It doesn't seem like these guys get a ton of separation, and then when they get the ball in their hands, we don't see them really just streaking through secondaries. Do you think we have one of those on the roster, or one of them will, assert themselves before the end of the year? A yak guy, someone that can take a slant to the house, or someone that's going to make someone miss and really just crib something. It just seems like that's an element of the offense that we're missing. And it seems like almost for 2 years now, because I don't really think that, Emeka did that some last year, but I don't really think that we have a huge yak threat on the team.
It's just not the build of receiver that we've had for a minute. I mean, they're all capable. Emeka can be a yak guy. Marv can be a yak guy. Carnell, take your pick, whoever you want. It's just not how we've run that offense the last year and a half. And, there is an element of that. You do want some free, take a 4-yard slant 80. You do want those free plays. So I wonder if Ryan doesn't kind of try to scheme some stuff up for Marvin and Emeka, especially, that allows them to go do that. Because there isn't a default guy. There's no Paris Campbell on this roster. There's no Curtis Samuel on this roster that's, housing stuff from 60 yards out, taking, plays 2 yards deep. We just don't have that yet. And if somebody asserts themselves and shows that they can do that, that's going to be great. But we also just haven't needed it in the last couple of years, because the way that our receivers win is productive. It doesn't need to be schemed as much, because they're NFL receivers. They get open and they're very good at what they do. I think, as there is a little more, as we see that line kind of come together and Kyle start to trust some stuff more, I think we will see balls put in a little better location wise that are going to allow for some more of those yak opportunities than we've seen so far. It's looked clunky. It's been a little ugly. I would love to see some of that cleaned up against Western Kentucky, so it doesn't have to look night and day against Notre Dame. But yeah, I think as we get deeper into the season, you're going to start to see the receivers get a little more comfortable with where Kyle likes to throw it when he's under pressure, or, the line is going to say, okay, we need to help, we need to help the center out or the left tackle or the right tackle a little bit and give them some help with a tight end or a back as they kind of solve their own problems going through the season. I think a lot of the, I guess we'll call it, ugliness of the offense will sort itself out.
So that brings me to our final question and the title of the show. Does Ohio State look like a playoff team? I just want to get your thoughts on, can Kyle elevate this team to national championship contention? And is this offensive line able to hold up? Because those seem to be the two biggest remaining questions. I know that we have questions about the pass rush and is this defense going to hold up? I feel like those are absolutely going to be answered on Saturday. But I think the questions that are still remain for the majority of the season is, will Kyle be able to elevate this team to national championship contention, and will the offensive line be able to keep him upright long enough to get to that point? So I just want to get your thoughts on, where does Ohio State stand? Is this a playoff caliber team? Does this team still have national championship aspirations?
I'll answer that in two parts. Right now, this is not a top 4 team in America. That's not. That doesn't mean they can't be. I still think they can be. I still think this team can win a national title. But it goes back to what we were talking about before. You want to peak at the right time. College football used to be, we want to brutally mash people down week after week after week and beat them into submission to, by the end of the year, we're the last man standing. It doesn't work that way anymore. You're trying to get through the regular season as unscathed as possible, be the healthiest team going into the playoff, and then those 2 games are the games that you really want to assert dominance and do things the way that you have. Now, obviously, being in the Big Ten, that scales back 2-3 weeks further for us. You want to see it going into Michigan. You want to see it going into the Big Ten championship game and then that run. But right now, this is not a top 4 team in America, I personally don't think. But there's everything there for them to be. It's just we haven't seen it yet. Not a problem. There are plenty of playoff teams. There are plenty of national title teams that have looked god-awful at this point in the season. Famously, Ohio State's last national championship team looked terrible at this time of the year. Georgia last year in a dogfight with Missouri. Alabama's already lost this year. LSU lost by 3 scores to a Florida State team that people thought was fraudulent. Clemson lost to Duke by 3 scores, and their only touchdown of the day was on a blocked punt. There are really widespread chaotic problems across college football. Do I think that this is an all-time Ohio State team? No, I don't. I think that if this team wins a national title, it will be partially because they did the right things at the time they needed to do them. They made opportunistic plays, and they won the games that they needed to win by the margins they needed to win them, and they did enough. Because I don't think that this is going to be one of those 2019 Ohio State teams that we talk about forever unless they win the national title. I think that's the differentiator here is there is no 2019 LSU out there. There is no 2017 Bama. There is no 2020 Bama. There is no 2021 Georgia out there. These teams all have issues. And I think of them, Ohio State has enough talent to get by just about anybody. And we've solved problems already that we needed to solve in 2022. We've seen some of those, especially defensively, solved early in 2023. The 3 biggest questions that this team's going to win a national title are, what is Kyle McCord's ceiling? Because we know what his floor is. His floor is a very competent quarterback that is more than capable enough to win the Big Ten. We saw Michigan do it with that formula in 2021 with Cade. What will the offensive line look like going forward? How quickly can it come together? How good will they play as a unit? Because it's more about the weakest link than it is about who the best player is. So how well can that line come together? And then the last one, can the defensive line be what we think they are, which is the best unit on paper in America? If they get there, that unit can carry this team very, very far before they need to find out what the offense can be. Can the offense help the defense early out? Can the defense win a game against Notre Dame? They had to last year. All of these questions will be answered going forward, but it's impossible to take a snapshot of this team right now and say, yes, they are a national championship team this moment. Because right now, I don't think they're a top 4 team in America if we take this snapshot right now. But everything is there for them not only to be a top 4 team in America, but to be the best team in America.
So I lied. I said that was the last question. I have one more before we get out of here. You said multiple times that you don't believe that they're a top 4 team in the country. And no need to elaborate because I know we're going to have you back and we're definitely going to talk about this again. I just need an answer to this question. Is Michigan in your top 4 right now?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll touch on that the next time that we have you on here. Just wanted to make sure that I had that right in your assessment. We are not a top 4 team, but you do have Michigan in your top 4. So this team has some work to do, but I appreciate you joining us today. It's always a great time having you on the pod. The chat loves you. So let the people know where they could find you so they could find more of your takes because you are a star around here.
Thanks for having me, Ron. Yeah, it's at Nanduri NFL on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. That's where I do most of my stuff. And like any and everyone else in here, you know, you might catch me 7 beers on a Saturday firing off takes about God knows what. You know, sometimes it's about what the best pizza in Chicago is, and sometimes it's about who should be starting at left tackle. You know, you get a variety of stuff on there, but we have fun on it and obviously love interacting with everybody here and in the chat and talking to you and Q when I get the chance, man. We'll do this again soon.
Absolutely. Can't wait to do it again. If you want to find me, you could find me at 2Ts on Twitter. That's 2_TEES. It's the same thing on Twitch. You could find me on TikTok at 2Shiesty. If you missed it last night, make sure you check out last night's episode of The Fans Edge with Mike, Cam, Disney, and EG. We have the college football pregame show here on the channel every Saturday from 10 to 11:30 with Big Chris Drew. Make sure you tap in for that. Us here every day for the Buckeye Roast at 8 a.m. with Cactus Q. Hopefully he has his internet fixed for tomorrow and we'll be able to see his face again here on the show. It was great having Anand on, and I hope we could do this more often because this is always a pleasure. Appreciate everyone joining the show, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Go Bucks. Like that video.